Welcome back to Atomic News, monitoring global chaos so you don't have to. Today, let's take a short break from the battlefield and talk about European politics. And let's begin with what may be the biggest rat inside the European Union. Viktor Orbán, a man who turned from an anti-communist reformer into the Kremlin's blunt instrument inside Europe. There is almost something mystical about Hungary's habit of ending up on the wrong side of history. In the First World War, it fought as part of Austria-Hungary on the side of the Central Powers. In the Second World War, it fought on the side of the Axis. And now, at another historic turning point for Europe, Budapest is once again pulling in the wrong direction. So how did Orban go from a young liberal anti-communist politician to Europe's internal saboteur? In the late 1980s, he helped found Fidesz as a liberal anti-communist movement and became nationally known after demanding the withdrawal of Soviet troops. But when he returned to power in 2010, he stopped behaving like a reformer and started building a system, a clan state, a patronage machine, a regime where political loyalty became a business model. Financial Times found that 13 businessmen closely tied to Orban won more than 28 billion euros in public contracts after his return to office. And one of the clearest symbols of that system now stands at Hat van Pusta near Felchut, a rebuilt estate that looks less like a farmhouse and more like a feudal palace. The main building alone is about 2,000 square meters, and Hungarian reporting has put the renovation cost in the range of billions of forints, roughly tens of millions of euros. In a country where Orban sells himself as a plain patriot, the image that sticks is simpler. While Hungary was being told to tighten its belt, the regime around him was building manor houses. Since 2022, Orban has been running not just an anti-Ukrainian line, but an anti-European one. Ukraine is simply the most convenient target inside that broader campaign. While the rest of Europe tried to build a common front against Russian aggression, Hungary kept jamming a stick into the spokes. In May 2025, Ukraine said it uncovered a Hungarian spy network in the Zakarpattia region that, according to the Security Service of Ukraine, was run by Hungarian military intelligence. Budapest answered with a theatrical mirror show, expulsions, retaliatory accusations, and a staged display of Ukrainian spies that looked less like serious counterintelligence and more like political revenge, bordering on absurdity. Then came reports from the Ukrainian side that reconnaissance drones had entered Ukrainian airspace from the direction of Hungary. Ukraine published the drones' route. The foreign ministry demanded an explanation, and Orban's reaction was not a serious denial but a shrug. He brushed the incident off, saying that 2 or 3 Hungarian drones over Ukraine were not something worth talking about. In other words, he did not really refute the incursion. He downplayed it, which in practice looked a lot like an admission. And then came the convoy affair. On March 5th in Budapest, 2 armored vehicles carrying Ukrainian state funds in transit through Hungary from Austria to Ukraine stopped responding. Their transponders showed they were inside Hungary's counterterrorism center. It later emerged that 7 employees of Ukraine's state-owned Oshad Bank had been detained while escorting roughly $82 million in cash and gold, including about $40 million, 35 million euros, and 9 kilograms of gold. The men were later released and the vehicles were eventually returned, but the money and gold were kept. The ugliest part was how the story was weaponized. Russian and pro-Hungarian channels quickly pushed the line that one of the detainees was Hennady Kuznetsov, a former major general of the Security Service of Ukraine, as if that by itself proved some dark conspiracy. In reality, the point of that narrative was obvious. Take a routine state transfer, attach a scary former security service face to it, and sell it as a spy thriller. The Guardian reported that the former Ukrainian security officer among the detainees was the one given a forced injection, likely a sedative or relaxant used to extract cooperation during interrogation, an old KGB-style trick. According to his lawyer, that injection triggered a hypertensive crisis. The detainees were held for more than 24 hours, often handcuffed and blindfolded. Under European legal standards, detention in handcuffs and blindfolds like that is treated as cruel, inhuman treatment. Hungary's official line was that it was investigating money laundering and acting against a so-called Ukrainian war mafia. But then Orban's government moved to create a retroactive legal basis to hold the seized assets for up to 60 days. In European legal logic, laws are not supposed to have retroactive force. So this too looks like political schizophrenia dressed up as procedure, something the Hungarian authorities should also be punished for. Hungarian officials then linked the return of the money to the restoration of Druzhba oil flows. Strip away the legal wrapping, and the method is simple. Seize Ukrainian state assets during transit, hold them during an oil dispute, and imply they come back only when your political demands are met. That is how terrorists behave. So what exactly is this Druzhba that Orban is trembling over? It is the old Soviet pipeline that he now uses like a blackmail hose. Yes, Hungary inherited its oil dependence from the Soviet era, but the claim that Druzhba is absolutely irreplaceable is cheap political manipulation. The European Commission has said there is no immediate supply emergency for Hungary and Slovakia. The EU has offered technical and financial support to restore flows and to manage alternatives. Czechia has already shown that countries long tied to Druzhba can diversify away. So no, Hungarians would not die without Russian oil. Fuel could get more expensive for a while. Logistics would get messier, and Orban would lose one of his favorite tools of blackmail. A small price to pay for not having the blood of murdered Ukrainians on your hands. This month, Orban blocked a €90 billion EU loan for Ukraine and tied the veto to the pipeline dispute, even though the latest shutdown followed a Russian strike on infrastructure in Ukraine. That is exactly where war and politics fuse together. Yes, Ukraine has struck parts of the Druzhba system inside Russia before, and yes, Russia has struck Druzhba-related infrastructure inside Ukraine too. Orban exploits that battlefield to extort Europe. He tells Brussels that one damaged Soviet pipeline can outweigh the security of an entire continent. The deeper issue is that the EU's machinery is too old for the age it is entering. A union of more than 500 million people cannot remain hostage to one Kremlin stooge with veto power, an individual to whom Moscow can always offer more money than Brussels can offer Hungary. And the worst part is that this is no longer just about vetoes. European leaders increasingly try to keep sensitive negotiations away from Hungary because Budapest keeps leaking too much to Moscow. That means the EU is already informally treating one of its own members as a security risk. On the threshold of a major continental war, consensus rules have started to look less like democracy and more like a built-in self-destruct button. Europe either needs mechanisms to suspend veto rights and voting rights in cases of systematic sabotage, or it has to seriously discuss expulsion mechanisms for states that behave like Trojan horses. Ukraine has shed more blood for the European idea than the majority of EU member states ever have. So, how exactly does Europe plan to defend itself from Russia if it still cannot defend itself from Orban? That is why Hungary's April 12th election matters not only to Hungary, but to all of Europe. Reuters reports that Péter Magyar's center-right TISA party is leading in important polls, and Magyar presents himself as a moderate national conservative who wants to restore more workable relations with the EU and NATO. He is dangerous to Orban, precisely because he is not some caricatured liberal crusader, but a figure who can speak to conservative voters without sounding like Brussels in lace and rhinestones. But if you walk through Budapest, you could easily think the real election is not Orban versus Magyar, but Orban versus Zelensky. Orban's machine has plastered the country with propaganda, portraying Zelensky as a threat to Hungarian sovereignty, as if Ukraine is waiting to occupy Hungary the moment Orban loses. That hysteria matters, because even if Magyar wins, he still has to govern a public that has been marinated in anti-Ukrainian and anti-European panic for years. And then there is the darkest layer. Zelensky openly said he hoped one person in the European Union would not block the €90 billion package for Ukraine, because otherwise we will give this person's address to our armed forces, to our boys, and let them speak to him in their own language. He did not name Orban directly, but the implication was obvious. That was a very reckless statement. Orban's camp immediately framed it as a threat and moved to turn him into a political victim. That was a reckless and unnecessary gift, because in the current atmosphere, with Russian influence operations swirling around Hungary's election, any alleged assassination attempt on Orban would have an enormous political effect, and a staged attack, for example during J.D. Vance's planned visit to Hungary in early April, would have a volcanic effect on the campaign. This is Professor Nuke, and this was Atomic News. Stay alert.
So stay tuned for all the wondrous views. You're watching Atomic News.